part of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here without any co-host today. I am flying solo, so you're gonna have to be patient with me. Hopefully, we won't have any technical issues, though. Adam is speaking at the Poor People's Campaign rally down in Montgomery, Alabama, and Ben has blown his back out. So, we're doing okay though. Ben's on the mend, and Adam's gonna have some fun today. So today on the program, we are talking to the national president of the American Postal Workers Union, Mark Dimondstein. He is the president of some 200,000 postal workers nationwide. We're going to be talking to him about issues with the Postal Service and his union's calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. We're also talking to Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr about his support for vouchers. His support for vouchers and loosening child labor laws. We pre-taped that interview yesterday. We're gonna have a good time listening to that, I think. And then we're also going to be giving y'all the latest on the UAW campaign at Mercedes. What's been going on with Nick Saban? He gave me a little bit of some heartburn when the announcement came out that he was speaking to Mercedes workers, but it's not so bad. So, all that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. The line is open, but I'm not going to be able to take your call for a little while, maybe not even until the second half of the show. I see that we've got one caller in the queue. Not going to be able to take your call for at least an hour. So if you want to, hang up and call back in a little while, that'll be fine. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week. We might respond to it on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online. Our website is TVLR.fm. You can subscribe to our newsletter there. We are also on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to make a one-time or recurring monthly donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate. You can also become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Logo caps are back, folks. tvlr.fm/store, and you can pre-order our TVLR logo dad caps. Also, if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do the show without the support of organized labor. So definitely think about that and reach out to us for more details. Since Adam is not here, I will also add the disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT or through your favorite podcasting app. We're proud to be a part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out if you want more good union programming. As most of y'all know, that we're not media professionals, just some diehard union folks who believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement and working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping that this project can make a difference on that front, and we could not do it without you. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us. With that out of the way, we're going to get right into last week in Southern labor. So here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from February 24th to March the 1st. In new campaigns, 20 workers at Crescent Paper Tube in Lewisport, Kentucky filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 5 workers at Cesar Chavez Foundation in Dallas, Texas filed a petition to hold a union election with Lone Star Labor Education, as did 2 more workers for the same organization in Austin. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 30 workers at SP Plus Corporation, which operates shuttles, valets, etc., in Sarasota, Florida, demonstrated support for unionization with the Teamsters, Local 79. 12 workers at EquipmentShare.com in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 513. 60 workers at Red River Science and Technology in Fort Knox, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Transport Workers Union, TWU. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 13 workers at Atlanta Symphony Orchestra in Atlanta, Georgia, demonstrated support for unionization with the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, Local 927. 9 workers at Anthony's Food in Meeker, Oklahoma, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 1000. 33 workers at Riverside Theater in Vero Beach, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with IATSE Local 500. 28 workers at Houston Landing in San Antonio, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Media Guild of the West, News Guild, CWA, Local 39213. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify UFCW Local 1996 as the union representing the 156 workers at Kraft Heinz / Maxwell House in Jacksonville, Florida. And 25 workers at Southeastern Paper Group in College Park, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 528. In campaign updates, all UAW this week, workers at Mercedes-Benz in Vance, Alabama, announced that a majority now support the union effort. A day prior to this announcement, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz gave an anti-union speech at a mandatory captive audience meeting, telling workers, quote, "I don't believe the UAW can help us to be better." A day after the announcement, Kay Ivey publicly blasted the Alabama workers as a, quote, looming threat to the state's economy. Nick Saban met with workers at Mercedes-Benz last week in what some anticipated to be his participation in the anti-union campaign. Workers, however, say that he did not attack the union and the talk was just generic, so pro-union Alabama fans can rest easy. In election results, there were 5 petitions for union elections that were withdrawn last week. First was 17 workers at Parker Transport in Clinton, Tennessee with the Teamsters, 3 workers at Marty Kinsella Collision Center in Florissant, Missouri with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW District Lodge 8, 95 workers at Tensar Corporation in Morrow, Georgia with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU Southeast Council, and 42 workers at Collins Landing Systems in Haltom City, Texas with the United Auto Workers. A petition to decertify the Washington-Baltimore News Guild, CWA Local 32035, as the union representing 17 workers at the Daily Progress in Charlottesville, Virginia, was withdrawn. drawn, and a unit clarification position for the currently 500-person unit at Big State Electric in San Antonio, Texas, by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 60, was withdrawn. 2 workers, shuttle drivers, at Vestas Services in Stafford, Texas, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 988. 8 workers at Heinz GS Properties in Washington, D.C. voted 5-3 in favor of unionization with IUOE Local 99. 174 workers at U.S. Sugar Savannah Refinery in Port Wentworth, Georgia, voted 41-112 against unionization with the Teamsters Local 528. In a decertification election, 4 workers at Gray's Auto Service in Richmond Heights, Missouri, voted unanimously in favor of decertifying the Automotive, Petroleum, and Allied Industries Employees Local 618, a Teamsters affiliate. 40 workers at OXDIA LLC in Kansas City, Missouri, voted 6-24 against unionization with the Teamsters Local 955. 6 workers at Leidos in North Merritt Island, Florida, voted 3-3 in an election on joining the IBEW Local 2088, and ties go to the employers. So the union election was unsuccessful. 50 workers at Roll Call in Washington, D.C. voted 41-3 in favor of unionization with the Washington-Baltimore News Guild. 85 workers at Southern Electric Corporation of Mississippi in Miami, Florida, yeah, that's you you heard that right, voted against unionization with the IBEW Local 222. 4 workers at Lee County Electric Cooperative in North Fort Myers, Florida, voted 3-1 in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 1933. Editorial and gaming workers at Imagine Gaming Network, IGN, won voluntary recognition for their unionization with the News Guild CWA and celebrated their win with a Twitch stream. Members of ATU Local 689 are still on strike after Transdev refused to bargain fairly, coming to the table with a proposal to cut benefits. In other strikes and bargaining updates, the Orlando Sentinel Guild wrote a long Twitter thread detailing why some of their members have left the paper even though their dream was to work in journalism. All the reasons revolved around low pay, disrespect, and poor benefits. The Teamsters and Anheuser-Busch came to a tentative agreement of averting a near strike, with the workers securing an average 23% raise over the term of the contract, with half of that, a $4 an hour raise, coming in the first year. They also secured a $2,500 ratification bonus, increased pension contributions and benefits, more leave, job security, and an end to 2-tier health care. The 5,000 members are voting on ratification on March 3rd to 5th. Teamsters Local 688 at Gray Bar in St. Louis, Missouri went on strike last week after they were not able to come to an agreement on pay, health care, and profit sharing. The Communication Workers of America reached a tentative agreement with AT&T Mobility in their contract negotiations, covering 5,000 CWA members spanning Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. The TA includes an immediate 5% raise and more. Members will vote on ratification next week. United Campus Workers of Mississippi, Local 3565, members at University of Mississippi, University of Southern Mississippi, and Mississippi State University came together for the Living Wage Week of Action to highlight the urgent need for pay increases for campus workers in the state. 7,000 UAW members who build Freightliner and Western Star trucks and Thomas-built buses for Daimler Truck North America are gearing up for a historic contract fight. The current contract expires at 12:01 a.m. on Friday, April 26, and workers at 6 facilities in North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. They are seeking solutions to lower pay and deteriorating benefits. Starbucks Workers United and Starbucks announced an agreement last week to begin discussions on a foundational framework to achieve collective bargaining agreements, resolve litigation, and a fair process for workers to organize. As a show of good faith, union workers will get the new benefits that non-union workers have received since the organizing campaign began about 3 years ago, along with back pay. An analysis from the Strategic Organizing Center estimates that Starbucks spent almost $250 million on union-busting activities. Kroger workers in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky and members of UFCW Local 400 voted to authorize a strike by 85% after voting to reject the company's proposal by 87%. With the contract already expired, the bargaining committee can now call on the approximately 3,000 workers across the 3 states to strike at any moment. South Florida janitors with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU Local 32BJ, reached a tentative agreement with the contractors that clean major buildings. The TA includes 27 to 28% raises over 4 years, more full-time employment, and more. The ratification vote is taking place on March the 2nd. The Orange County, Florida School Board is holding an impasse hearing over their desire to increase the health insurance rates for the teachers union. The union is saying that the scheduled time of 9:30 a.m. is to decrease attendance from their members and supportive working people in the community. In politics and legislation, the Teamsters are holding a roundtable with President Joe Biden on March the 12th. The FTC is suing to block a merger of Kroger and Albertsons, a move supported broadly by labor due to concerns that a merger would deteriorate working conditions. So-called school choice is progressing in the Alabama legislature, and President Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers is expressing concern. State Senator Marika Coleman filed a bill in the legislature that would amend the Alabama Jobs Act to revoke tax incentives for companies that violate child labor law. The Florida Senate passed a bill that would ban lab-grown meat and stop municipalities from doing anything to encourage installation of electric vehicle charging stations. The Mississippi House passed Medicaid expansion 92-20, which is more than enough to overcome a veto. It now heads to the Senate. The Alabama House passed a bill to give immunity to IVF providers, 94-6, but some Democrats are sounding the alarm that this will likely require a constitutional amendment. Since Alabama law now defines a fertilized egg as a human being with full personhood, this bill essentially grants immunity to murderers as defined by the law. So you could see a judge striking the law down as unconstitutional pretty easily. The mayor of Montgomery signed an executive order for giving $10 million in old municipal debt. A writer in one of the versions of Tennessee's school choice scams would mandate the public school system to renovate charter school locations in some cases, even when the charter school owns the building, without ownership reverting to the school system in the case that the charter school goes under. A bill in the Kentucky House would repeal workers' rights to a lunch break, to a break every 4 hours, to time and a half on the 7th day of work, to payment for traveling between jobs, and it also decreases the statute of limitations for labor violations from 5 to 3 years. The West Virginia AFL-CIO is opposing a bill that would take away unemployment benefits from workers who are laid off due to no fault of their own. A Catholic priest testified in opposition to a Florida bill that would bar municipalities from passing heat protection ordinances for workers. Candidates for Alabama's newly redrawn Congressional District 2 debated last week, and neither the candidates nor the moderators mentioned unions or the UAW's campaign at Hyundai in the district that they are vying to represent. In internal union affairs, CWA's Human Rights Department is launching a radio program on KYOK in Houston, Texas to talk about solidarity and worker power, Thursdays from 10 to 11 Eastern. Dozens of leaders in the firefighters union in Alabama met to strategize about strengthening their local unions and establishing collective bargaining agreements. And AFGE hit a major milestone in their nationwide internal organizing campaign, hitting 300,000 members. And with that, we are going to go to a break. We're going to be right back talking to our first guest of the program, APWU National President Mark Dimondstein. Stay tuned, folks.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller, but he is speaking at the Poor People's Campaign rally down in Montgomery today. The person who would normally fill in for him is, he's blown his back out, so he's not able to help, so I'm running the ship solo, so appreciate your patience, everybody, with any issues that we might encounter, but everything's gone smooth so far. If you have anything to add, you can join us on in our YouTube or Facebook chat. Appreciate everybody tuning in right now. We'll be taking calls later in the program at 844-899-TVLR. Our first guest of the program is National President of the American Postal Workers Union, Mark Dimondstein. He is joining us now, and we appreciate him taking the time to do that. President Dimondstein, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here with you and all your listeners.
Whoops. I think everybody else is hearing you, but I'm not, so I am, but I think I know how to fix it. And, okay, now let's see. Can you say, welcome.
Jacob, thanks so much for having me. Good to be here, and greetings to all you and all of your good listeners.
So we were, we were going to be talking to President Dimondstein about a few different things. I'm interested in his how he joined the labor movement. I think that's a very that's a very good story is my understanding. And also his union, the American Postal Workers Union, has been really leading the charge in the calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as making sure that the Postal Service remains a good service for the American public. So let's try this again. I tried something else, and maybe this will work. President Dimondstein, can you talk to us about your how you got started in the labor movement? I'm sorry, I'm still not hearing you. I'm gonna go to a break really quick and see if I can't get this figured out. I really apologize, guys. We tested the Zoom before and everything, and I don't know what's going on. But we'll be right back, folks. Okay, folks, I think we have figured it out. Appreciate everybody's patience, but we now have on the line National President of the American Postal Workers Union, representing some 200,000 postal workers across the country, President Mark Dimondstein. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for making the time this morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Jacob, and greetings to you and all your good listeners.
Absolutely. So, can you talk to us about your, what was it that brought you into the labor movement? Why is this something that you have decided, you want to devote basically your life to?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, the basic question is, I went to work at the post office and had the opportunity to join a union. Now, I did grow up in a household that was sympathetic to unions. I knew unions were good for workers. And so when I went to work at the post office, that was my first opportunity to go to work in a workplace that already had a union. So I readily joined and raised my hand to get involved. And, we thought that I went to work in Greensboro, North Carolina at the post office. And I always respect others who are willing to step up and lead, but we thought there were some shortcomings. We thought we could do better. And so I got involved with the union. Next thing I knew is my coworkers were coming to me and said, "We need you as our local president." So I stepped up there. Over the years, I did organizing. And at some point, we thought we needed to make changes in our national union. And we stepped up and ran a team. And in 2013, we assumed, I assumed the office of national president. But you don't have to be a national president or a local president or a branch president to play a role in helping to build more power for workers. In our case, for postal workers, but all workers. We're part of a big movement. And so I was always just willing to raise my hand. I was never raising my hand, Jacob, with the idea that I would one day be local president or be national president. I raised my hand and got involved because I wanted a better workplace, a safer workplace, more organized workplace. And of course, the stronger the union are, the better the conditions are that we work under, the better our pay and benefits are. So it's probably a typical story like many. We all have to make a living, and we want to make the best living we can. And the union is a wonderful vehicle to do that. But it has to be driven well. It has to be steered well. So if anybody out there is listening in a union, I certainly hope you're involved. You stay involved. You get more involved. And we row together to get an ever more powerful labor movement. And we certainly have a lot of work to do as
Absolutely.
the labor movement of the United States.
There's definitely a lot of work to do. And I find that is a lot of, there are a lot of positions that folks kind of wind up in because they were one of the only people to be willing to raise their hand. Because there's a lot of work to be done, and it's difficult work, right? It's I mean, that's how.
Well, Jacob, it might be difficult at times, but it's also joyous work.
Yes.
It's a wonderful and important cause. And so I don't want anybody to shy away, because sometimes it can get a little rocky and difficult. I can't think of anything better to go through our lives with than a cause for justice,
Right.
social justice, workplace justice. So I hope when people get involved, they also get the joy out of it. Of being something bigger than all of us individually, but individually something we can all help build and play a role in.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And APWU here, I've got a soft spot in my heart for your union. They were one of the 5 unions that came together with my union to reconstitute the North Alabama Labor Council. And so they were very helpful in reconstituting that after it was dechartered back in 2017. And and one of your members are now Secretary Treasurer of the Labor Council in North Alabama.
Great.
And so we're really appreciative for having y'all be part of making the Labor Council active again. I think it's a very important institution. So
That's interesting because as postal workers, we know we have to have a lot of alliances and solidarity with the labor movement and the community and the people of the country to keep the post office strong. But that solidarity always has to be a 2 and 3 and 4-way street. So I'm really glad to hear that our local folks out there are part of the broader labor movement. So we don't just expect people to stand with us. We expect our people to stand with all workers and beyond workers, many of the struggles that our communities have for justice.
Right. And so, the Postal Service has been going through a lot of changes recently, and there's been some amount of controversy over some of the changes, and some of them have been kind of, not really remarked on. But Trump appointed Louis DeJoy, I think is Louis, not Louis, Louis DeJoy to be Postmaster General over the Postal Service, and he has this 10-year plan to modernize the Postal Service. And there's been, like I said, there's been a lot of controversy, but my understanding is that your union has been working with him and with the Postal Service to try to, make the best of this plan, because, the idea that the Postal Service needs to be modernized, or there are things that we can improve on, that doesn't seem very controversial, and that seems like something we should be able to agree on, that we want to improve things. It's just the devil's in the details, and I think a lot of union members, particularly when we hear calls for modernization from management, we get spooked real easy, right? But we want to approach things skeptically, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So talk to us about the Postal Service and some of the recent changes and this 10-year plan to modernize the Postal Service.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Just one quick correction, though. The President of the United States does not appoint the Postmaster General. The President of the United States, with Senate confirmation, appoints the Postal Board of Governors, which when it's full is 9 people. It's the Postal Board of Governors that hires and fires the PMG. But he did come in when Trump was in office, and the PMG does apparently come out of the more conservative political world. But in terms of what's happening now, Jacob, it's complicated like it always is. And we try to stick with the issues. So there are things in this. The post office has always had 5-year plans, 10-year plans. They're written words on a piece of paper. Louis DeJoy is very aggressive about carrying that out. And but we try to stick to the issue. So I've called the 10-year plan the good, bad, and the ugly. That means there are things in it we like. For example, this was the first postal plan in decades that advocated for making 6-day delivery part of the law. It was not part of the law before. We had to deal with it every year. And our sister union, the National Association of Letter Carriers, that was obviously vitally important to them. But it's important to all the customers, and it's important to all of us that work in the post office, because we wanted to be vibrant and robust, and there for the needs of the people. There were things in the 10-year plan that acknowledged a multi-tier worker system that had a lot of what we call non-careers, so didn't have the full load of benefits, didn't have the full wages. Was something that we had to fix, and there needed to be a better path to career employment in the Postal Service. There's also some new ideas in the plan about new services in the retail units, and that's very important to us. So those are some of the examples in the good, bad, and the ugly of the good. And by the way, the 10-year plan, different than previous plans, remove the anti-worker and anti-union ideas that were in earlier plans. So we were pleased about that. But then we get to the ugly. They slowed down mail under this plan based on distance. We opposed it. We generated 130,000 emails, and some of your listeners may have been part of that to try to stop it. We did not succeed, but we certainly opposed that. And we have some serious concerns about this modernization plan, that it also may slow down mail. And whatever modernization or optimization is going on, were very, very strong and outspoken that the service has to get better. It's not where it should be. There are many reasons for that. This administration and postal management inherited some of those problems, but DeJoy is now the captain of the ship. So I think it's mixed. Now, the plan itself, does the postal network need to be modernized? Probably it does. And why? One is mail is very much changing. The mail mix is changing. Seeing you on the screen, I know that you're young, at least compared to me. I have 3 daughters, grown adult daughters. They don't get their bills in the mail, and they don't pay their bills through the mail. My wife and I do. So it's a changing world. And my 3 daughters are like tens of millions of other people that pay their bills online. They don't do it to save a stamp, the price of a stamp. They do it because it's so easy and so convenient. But we have a saying in our union that the internet taketh and the internet giveth. So while there's been a huge diversion of letter mail onto the internet, in fact, letter mail is down over 50% from 2007, 2008 period. And that's very troubling for the finances of the post office. And your listeners may know or may not know that the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970 eliminated the taxpayer funding of the post office, and the post office has to run off revenue. So when the letter mail is cut in half, that affects revenue. But the internet also giveth. And so we have this whole growth of package and e-commerce, and it accelerated during the COVID pandemic, where package growth is a large part of our future. Now, that doesn't mean we want the Postal Service and to become a third package delivery company in the United States. Mail is still vitally important to people, whether it's mail ballots, whether it's greeting cards, whether it's financial transactions, whether it's medicines. Mail is vitally important for the people of the country. But we also know to have enough revenue to meet the demands of the people of the country, delivering to over 160 million addresses every day and 1 million new addresses every year, we're going to have some of that package growth. And that package growth is, and by the way, we go to every address by law. So wouldn't it be best for everybody, including the environment, to have the post office delivering all packages? But that package growth demands different type of equipment and larger buildings. And so a lot of what seems to be driving this network modernization plan is the idea of having big enough buildings to aggregate the packages, these giant sorting machines. Look, we don't love automation, but we're not going to be able to stop automation. We can get on a show some other time, Jacob, and maybe talk about, or if you want to talk about it later in this show, a little bit about how workers can, and the union movement, I think, should be fighting harder for things like a shorter work week with no cut in pay to deal with automation. But we're not going to stop the automation. And so the automation's here, and it's driving changes in our machinery, in our buildings, in our transportation, and yes, at times in our staffing. So the mail mix is changing. The internet has diverted tons of letter mail and what we call flats out of the postal system. And we have to be able to, if we're going to survive and be here for the people of the country, we have to be able to meet those needs. So we try to keep an open mind to some of what's going on. But I have to tell you and your listeners, what's ever on paper that may make some sense, the implementation so far has not been good. And it's not been good in relation to the workers, and it's not been good in relation to the service that the people of this country need and deserve and have a right to under the law. They have a right to what's called, under the law, prompt, reliable, and efficient services. So we have a lot of work to do. And when you say we're working with management, to an extent we are, and to an extent we're not. Because when they're wrong, we're organizing. We have a lot of local unions now that are out there protesting about some of the distances they're going to move mail to be processed in these larger facilities. And if you move mail too far, then you're slowing down the service to the people of the country.
Right. And what you said about automation has always been something of a bailiwick of mine, that automation on its face really should be great, right? I mean, we can do the same amount of work for less labor time, right? I mean, that should be workers should be able to rejoice when automation comes around. But the unfortunate reality of it is that the people who own the companies, they're the ones that get to decide how automation is implemented, and that's why workers have issues with automation, is because instead of allowing us to do the same amount of work for the same amount of pay for a shorter time, right? Because we're able, due to automation, to produce more within a short amount of time. Instead of that, what we get is job cuts, and we have to do more in the same amount of time, or sometimes more in more time, because they cut jobs and cut jobs and cut jobs even beyond what the automation would theoretically allow for, right? And then you're left with, after the automation, you're left with people being overworked and all of this stuff. And so, we're completely on the same page there. It's a really important issue, how automation is implemented. What are some of the ways that y'all are fighting back in some of the instances where these changes are potentially endangering the quickness of service and the quality of service for postal customers?
Well, when they consolidate mail into larger facilities, some of it may be 5, 10, 15, 20 miles, 30 miles down the street. But some of the plans that the post office is looking at and beginning to implement, they're taking mail on trucks 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And so when they do that, and it's called, when they consolidate a whole section of mail, like in North Alabama, you have a service area. And in that service area, you have mail generated for your zip code and the surrounding zip codes. That mail, if it gets taken on a truck 4 or 5 hours away, is definitely going to slow down. But when the post office does that by their own regulations, they have to have community meetings for the local customers, the local workers who also are postal customers, to come and speak out. And our locals have been doing a terrific job in certain parts of the country. To organize for those meetings. We've had meetings with hundreds and hundreds of postal patrons there, both individual, small business, sometimes large business, who want the mail to stay local so that they get the best possible service. We're also certainly fighting back in our headquarters level conversations and discussions with postal management. But the main way we fight back in this type of issue, Jacob, is to unite with the people of the country. The APWU, first and foremost. Our members are really, really and extremely dedicated to the mission of the Postal Service. I remember years ago, I was on a workroom floor in a big Midwest city, and these two women approached me and said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And they had tears in their eyes, because the mail wasn't moved like it should be. And they said, "This isn't what I would want with my mail, and this isn't what I want to do for the people of this country." So we're extremely dedicated to the mission, and we unite with the people in defense of their interests. And we, of course, have common interests. We also are fighting back in terms of the whole service question, which is beyond just this modernization plan. We are also fighting for better staffing, which then creates better service. There's the post office, and this is a management decision, not a union decision, is in many cases the retail units where you go in and rent a post office box, buy stamps, get a money order, bring a package, return a package, get a certified letter, that they're so short-staffed. If somebody has a vacation, if somebody has a day, if somebody has an emergency, if somebody has a sick child, there's actually nobody else to cover it. In many cases, they're just shuttering the post office for a day or two. That's absolutely outrageous and wrong. So we stand with the people of the country demanding better service. And by the way, when we get better staffing, which creates better service, we also get better working conditions for the postal worker. When you're short-staffed, the stress is higher, the hassles are higher, and the working conditions are far worse. So those are some of the ways that we're fighting back. We have a new campaign called Building a Better Post Office. You can go on to, your listeners could go onto our website, APWU.org, and find out about how they can help with petitions and other things to get better staffing and better service.
The better staffing is not just with the postal workers. Some people may not know that the Postal Service, there are 4 unions broadly. Maybe there's some other, but there are 4 major players representing Postal Service workers: the American Postal Workers Union, the National Association of Letter Carriers, National Association of Rural Letter Carriers, and the National Postal Mail Handlers Union. So the letter carriers have their contract coming up in May, is my understanding. That's when it expires. When does APWU's contract expire? When do y'all begin negotiations?
So there are 2, and you actually did something that I probably couldn't have done. You got all those names right in one way, because we tend to say shortcuts like Mail Handlers Union and Rural Carriers. So the city letter carriers, their contract expired last May of 2023. So they're still in negotiations. The rural letter carriers expire this May, and our contract, which covers almost 200,000 workers, these are the clerks you'll see in the retail units, the clerks that sort mail through the night that you don't see, the clerks that help get the letter carriers onto the street every day. We represent the maintenance employees, both building and machine. We represent the motor vehicle drivers and those who repair the trucks and the vehicles and some others. Our contract expires on September 20th of this year. It's the largest single bargaining unit of any union in the country this year that's up this year. And we open our negotiations on June 25th. So it's a few months out. We're already deeply preparing and organizing for it.
For the letter carriers, y'all, since y'all are federal employees, even though the Postal Service has a little bit of a different structure than other federal agencies, y'all are federal employees, so we don't have the right to strike. I'm a member of AFGE, and so what happens is basically if there's an impasse, instead of going to a strike, then federal unions will go to arbitration. And some letter carriers that I've spoken to, and this isn't like I have inside knowledge from the bargaining committee. This is just people that I'm talking to on the ground here in Huntsville. They've talked about the UPS contract, and they're hoping that is helpful to them in their arbitration, making the case that, look, you need to really significantly increase pay here, because we as letter carriers, we can't keep up. Because why would you work as a letter carrier for the Postal Service making, $5, $6, $7 an hour less than you could doing the same thing at UPS, right? And so are y'all kind of basically tracking a similar position for if you have to take it to arbitration?
Well, it's an interesting question. Let me go back to the question of the right to strike. You are correct that we do not have the legal right to strike. And it would be unusual to have one, but in our history, we have one. We have had one. We had the Great Postal Strike in 1970. That's what actually led to the creation of the APW that merged 5 of the unions. I wished we had all merged then, because I've always been a believer that when we're dealing with one company, we should have one union and not be pitted against each other. But that was a victorious strike. Nobody was fired. They brought the country to their knees. But so I just want to clear up that the right of workers to strike is an inherent right. If you're going to use it in more difficult circumstances, and it's never easy to strike, then you just have to be that much more organized, and you have to have a situation where workers are just to the point that enough was enough. And that's what happened in 1970. When you raise going to arbitration for a contract, you are correct. What's happening around the world with the rest of the workers has an impact on what happens in arbitration. The 1970 law, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds for your listeners, but it basically established what they call a wage comparability standard, that we're supposed to be paid similar to those doing similar work, workers doing similar work in the private sector. In 1970, we were way below, so that helped uplift us. but in more recent decades has been used against us to say that we need to go down. So when workers are doing better around the country, and I'm glad to be talking to you at a time that there is a new militancy, the United Auto Workers, the UPS workers, the SAG-AFTRA workers, the Amazon workers stirring like in your part of the country and other parts. That kind of motion will certainly help us at the bargaining table. Now, having said that, we're not private sector. We're not this massively profitable companies like the big three were or UPS is. In fact, the Postal Service is not supposed to make tons of money. It's supposed to break even and be there for the people of the country. But when UPS workers do similar work in the private sector, that's certainly going to help us. So hats off to the organized Teamster UPS workers and their leadership for standing strong, getting some real gains. And we believe that the advances of other workers can only help us at our bargaining table, even given some of the differences that are going on.
So Will, as we're wrapping up, I want to, because I do want to make sure that we get to this, changing topics pretty quickly. The situation in Israel and Palestine has really kind of captured the minds of a lot of people in the United States, and labor has really started to coalesce around the position of supporting a ceasefire in Gaza. There's still, I think, a lot of work to do within the labor movement to see some action on that position being now the mainstream position. The AFL-CIO has endorsed that position. And your union is now a part of the National Labor Coalition for a ceasefire to try to do just that, to try to push and not just have it be, something that was tweeted out once and then you forget about. Right. Your union is one of them that's trying to push to make sure that this actually happens. But you and APWU were actually out front on this issue of a ceasefire before a lot of others were. There was some reporting in the New York Times about one of the executive board calls where you were, very in opposition to really, or not, I don't want to say opposition, but with a different stance than the rest of the executive board, staking out this position that a ceasefire is important and seeing justice in Palestine is important. Why there are two questions, or there are a couple of questions here that people will say immediately. And one is, you're an American trade union leader. Why are you talking about this conflict that's happening in another part of the world that, they would say is not affecting you? What would be your answer to folks that would ask that?
Well, we talked about solidarity a little earlier. Our solidarity doesn't stop at our borders. So one is, or shouldn't. One is we stand in solidarity with working people throughout the world and their struggles, and that includes the working people of Gaza. We are a union, and many others are like us. We believe in equality. We believe in social justice. We believe in human and labor rights. We believe in peace, and we believe in international solidarity. But deeper than that, who's asked to fight these wars? Who's demanded upon to go fight these, in this case, what would be an unjust war in our view? So here you have a deep threat of a widening war. Countries are being bombed across borders. The United States, the most, maybe in some ways, people would say the most powerful military on earth, is bombing the poorest country on earth as we are having this show. So one, there's a real danger of a wider regional war or even a world war. So that obviously affects working people throughout this country and throughout the world. The other thing is it's our tax dollars. The United States funds the Israeli military machine at about $4 billion a year after year. How that tax money is used and what it could be better used for is a working class issue of the United States. And then President Biden, as soon as October 7th took place, and we condemned the actions of Hamas in our statement. We unequivocally condemned it, but we also condemned this reaction on the part of the state of Israel that has targeted civilians, largely women and children, causing mass starvation, mass displacement, mass destruction of housing. These, you can't get around it. These are war crimes. And working people who pay taxes, we're different than Bezos of Amazon, all right, or Gates of Microsoft. Working people pay taxes. And we want our taxes used to help working people here, help our communities, and certainly help working people everywhere. And President Biden immediately went after October 7th to let's have billions and billions of more dollars to fund what? Keeping water, food, medical supplies from reaching a civilian and innocent population. So I think it is a workers' issue. And you are right. Some people react that way, that, you know, why don't we just stick to our four walls of the post office? But unions at their best realize that when we leave our workplaces, we live in a community, we live in states, we live in a country, and we live in a world. And we can have an impact and should be concerned about what happens when we leave work and what's happening to our families, our communities, and the family of man, as we call it, throughout the world. So it's definitely a working class issue. And one of the reasons for a ceasefire, the immediate reason, is the cries of humanity. You know, unless people think that people that might have different religious backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different national backgrounds, speak different languages, are second class or third class or fourth class or less than human. We have to listen to the cries of humanity. But beyond that, we also want to make sure this conflict doesn't spread into a regional or possible world war. We have a military budget, Jacob, that's $900 billion, almost $1 trillion a year. Think about what that money could be used for if it was cut in half, and we still have this massive military machine. But we got all that money that go into schools and housing, medical care, clean water, clean air, an EV transition, whatever it is. And so these are all very close and should be close to working people. And working people are generally told, leave the politics to somebody else. What they mean by that is leave the politics, the foreign policies, to Wall Street, to corporate America. They're not out here for us. They're out here for them.
It really is, if you think about it, you know, for longer than the time that it takes you to say it, it makes sense. You know, why would a union have a position on a war? You know, I mean, exactly like you said, a war is just, you know, working people, and in this case, conscripted working people, bombing other working people with the taxes of working people from across the world. So why would organized bodies of working people not have a position? It would actually, the strange thing would be for the organized working class to be silent on an issue of war. That's actually the strange thing. And yes, when they say when they tell us to stay out of politics or stay out of foreign policy, they're just saying, you know, let the bosses handle it, and that shouldn't, you know, because the bosses aren't going to die, right? It's going to be working people that are going to have to bear the brunt of these decisions one way or another. And the words that you used, a second question is, you know, as a Jewish person, why do you support the ceasefire? And you know, a lot of the words that I imagine that your answer would be pretty similar, right? You talked about, why do I, as a trade union leader, support a ceasefire in Gaza and justice in Palestine? Well, because I support, you know, justice, and I have values of solidarity and universal human rights, and you know, there were a lot of, you know, kind of spiritual words there in your explanation, and I imagine that your answer to why, as a Jewish person, you would support this, it would be pretty similar. You can tell me if I'm off.
No, you're on it. Look, I am a proud Jewish American. My family was decimated by the Nazi fascist, German-led Nazi fascist hordes. Some died in battle, some died in extermination camps, some died in work camps. My firstborn is named after a cousin of ours who was a famous anti-fascist partisan in France. So it's part of our history. It's part of our DNA. It's part of what has shaped me to even be part of the labor movement and the ongoing struggle for workers' rights and social justice. But coming from that history, when we say never again to a Holocaust and genocide and ethnic cleansing that targeted people based on who they are and killed over 6 million Jewish people, when we say never again, then that has to apply to everybody. And so I think Jewish people should be even more sensitive, whoever does it. And it can't be done. And we say never, not in our name. So, and there's a real effort, Jacob, to equate any criticism of the government of Israel with somehow that equates to be anti-Jewish or what we have termed as anti-Semitic. That's a big lie. The state of Israel and this Netanyahu government needs to be criticized. You don't target civilians. They're trying to wipe out 2.3 million people in an open air prison with nowhere to go. And so there's a lot of Jewish voices out here saying not in our name. And I'm certainly one of them. And we should reject the idea, and this is now happening in workplaces and college campuses where people are stepping up and criticizing the actions of the government, are now being fired, relegated, thrown out of school, job opportunities canceled. That's a form of discrimination itself. So we have to be very careful to oppose any growing anti-Semitism, meaning the idea that you're going to target somebody because they're Jewish. But we also have to oppose targeting anybody because they're Muslim, Arab American, and so on. And our call was very simple. And you're right, a lot of unions have come on board, and we're glad for it. Some of the largest unions in the country, the NEA, the SEIU, the AFT now, the United Auto Workers, the CWA, have come to the same path. And our path is we condemn the as I said earlier, the Hamas attacks. We condemn what the Israel government has done, killing and targeting 30,000 people, mostly civilians. Mass starvation now is beginning to happen. And so we call for the release of the hostages on all sides. And we call for massive humanitarian aid. We're not going to be able to figure out on this broadcast today to solve the complex historical issues that led to this problem. But we can fight for a stopping of the hostilities, a stopping of this indiscriminate bombing, and certainly call and see if there's a path, and there are many different opinions on the path, but some kind of path forward to peace.
Mark Dimondstein, president of the American Postal Workers Union, representing 200,000 Postal Service employees across the country. Really appreciate your time. You were very generous and patient today. Thank you very much, and look forward to talking to you again.
Jacob, thanks so much for having me anytime, and all your good listeners out there, and you keep up the good fight for unions, for workers' rights, and for social justice.
Thanks, brother. Talk soon. All right, folks, that is going to be it for our conversation with President Mark Dimondstein. We're going to go and head to a break, and we're going to be right back to wrap up the show. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at AFGE.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here by myself. Adam is speaking in Montgomery, and Ben has messed up his back, so I'm driving solo today. I appreciate everybody's patience as we worked through those technical difficulties. We've got about 10 minutes left here in the first half of the show, but we've got a whole second half of the program. Where we will be online and on WMMT. We are going to be talking in the second half of the show to former New York Times labor reporter Stephen Greenhouse. Also going to be reacting to a clip of Sean Fain on CBS. And we are going to have to listen to, because we lost so much time dealing with the technical difficulties, we're not going to be able to get to our interview with Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr about his support for vouchers and loosening child labor laws. So if you want to hear that, you're going to have to listen to the second half of the show. Find us on YouTube and Facebook right now to tune in. And because that was a good conversation. Really appreciated him taking the time to talk to us about that. And really looking forward to y'all hearing our conversation with Stephen Greenhouse as well. Stephen Greenhouse is a wealth of knowledge and always has good stuff to say. So as we're wrapping up, I wanted to give you the latest on the Mercedes campaign. The Mercedes campaign at the UAW Mercedes campaign down in Vance, Alabama, just outside of Tuscaloosa. They announced last week that they hit 50%. They hit 50% cards signed. That means 50% of the 50% of the workers there support the union, and that is a big milestone, and really looking forward to seeing them continue to collect support. This has happened in just 6 months, I believe. That is incredibly impressive movement. The last time that they had a campaign, workers that I've talked to there said it took something like a year and a half to just get to 30%, right? So this is extremely fast movement from the folks who are supportive of the union down there at Mercedes. So huge movement. Obviously, the bosses, the executive class in Alabama, the owning class in Alabama are not happy with this. Kay Ivey continues to blast the Alabama auto workers, saying that the UAW is an out-of-state special interest. And we talked about this before, but it is just using that slur in this fight specifically. I mean, it's always a slur, and it's always nonsensical when you're talking about activists and out-of-state special interest group. You know, it never really makes sense, right? It never does. But in this one in particular, for this fight in particular, this union campaign in particular, it is incredibly ironic because she is slurring Alabama auto workers who are organizing in coordination with other American auto workers, slandering them with the term out-of-state special interests. And who is she doing this in support of? She's doing this in support of Hyundai. Hyundai. I want you to say that name in your head again. Hyundai. That is not an American company. It's not an Alabama company, and it's not even an American company. It's not even an American company. It is a foreign company, Hyundai. Mercedes-Benz, not an American company, not an Alabama company, right? Honda, Toyota, not American companies, not Alabama companies. These are literally foreign special interest groups that she is flying in and attacking her own constituents on behalf of. So it is a very funny slur in this particular instance. Nick Saban on Thursday evening spoke to Mercedes workers. Apparently this is not something that has never happened before. Nick Saban owns multiple Mercedes-Benz dealerships, and so occasionally, apparently, he will come and speak to the Mercedes workers in Alabama. And so this visit was announced, and with everything going on, there was a lot of consternation and worry that this would be in service of the anti-union campaign. And now some people even afterwards said that this is kind of, you know, whether even though there were not explicitly anti-union comments, it was still in the service of the anti-union campaign. This is from Alex Press, labor reporter for Jacobin. She says, the melding of motivational self-help axioms with mentions of his driving a Mercedes and owning Mercedes dealerships, all in service, whether he makes explicitly anti-union comments or not, of defeating an organizing drive. And then she quotes him, quote, "We wanted people on this team who were hard workers, who had a work ethic. You reap what you sow. There can be no great victories without overcoming adversity." And so, you know, like Alex said, this is a lot of kind of generic self-help, motivational type of stuff. Something that you could imagine a college football coach saying to his football players in halftime, right? So, you know, but there's potentially at least an implicit, you know, attack on the union there, but at least it wasn't explicit, and you know, facially he was neutral as it relates to the union campaign. He didn't remark on it, so that's good. I think pro-union Alabama fans can rest easy and take that ambiguity as a win. because it would have been really detrimental, I think, to the union campaign if he had come out against it. So that's very, very good, and it would be very detrimental to the health of some Alabama fans that I know if he had come out explicitly against the union campaign. So good news there for sure. So that's where we stand right now with the Mercedes campaign. Of course, y'all already know that 50% of workers at Volkswagen in Chattanooga have signed on to support the union. 30% of Hyundai workers in Montgomery have signed on to support the union. And so we're going to continue to follow this. If you work at Toyota here in Huntsville and you're listening to me right now, uaw.org/join. What are you doing? Sign the card and participate in the campaign. Get on the organizing committee. This is a really huge opportunity for auto workers right now. Never a better time to organize than Year of Our Lord 2024. Lots of opportunities to make your life better, to make your family's life better, and to make your communities better. So uaw.org/join. And that's going to be it for us on the first half of the show. Like I said, really appreciate everybody's patience through all of the technical difficulties. Apologies for that. I got here over an hour, or like an hour and a half early to try to work through all of those technical glitches that you could foresee, and even that one specifically. We tried to make it, tried to prepare and make it so that wouldn't happen, and nevertheless it did. So what can you do? As we're wrapping up, folks, check out the Poor People's Campaign, the Selma March. You can maybe you'll be able to see Adam's speech there. The AFL-CIO has an organizing institute down in Birmingham here in the next couple of weeks, so get with your local union or your labor council if you would like to go to that. You do have to be sponsored by your union or your local labor council. If you're a college student, a college professor, or have any connections to a college campus and you would be interested in hosting a pro-labor event, then check out Labor Spring 2024. That's an initiative out of Georgetown University. And if you're in Alabama and you're interested, hit us up and we'll help make that happen. If you're not on our email list, TVLR.fm, sign up for that. Get updates last week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch every single week. And give us a call. We're about to head into overtime, and we're going to be taking your calls, 844-899-8857. See you next week. All right, folks, we are off the radio. Appreciate you tuning in and sticking around, listening to us wherever you're doing that. We're going to go to a break, and we're going to be right back with the second half of the show. Like I said, we have an interview with Stephen Greenhouse that we're going to be playing for you. We're going to be playing the interview with Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr, and we're going to be taking this phone call. This fella's been waiting very patiently. We'll get to that phone call right at the top, so make sure you don't go anywhere, folks. You are listening to the Valley Labor Reports. Oh, geez.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to
welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, running the ship solo today. Appreciate everybody's patience and sticking around with us. We have now 25, almost 30 people watching the stream and only 24 likes. If you haven't liked the stream, please do. Folks, if you are listening to us on your favorite podcasting app, give us a 5-star rating, particularly on Apple Podcasts. Folks, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating. And appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat. Horrible Alabama Drivers, the Gump, says, good morning. That was me, so I'll call back. So I'm assuming that this is you on the call. John Brown's Body. Republicans saw the meme, the children yearn for the mines, and took it as official policy. Indeed, yeah, that's exactly what's happened, and it's crazy. Brandon Hill says, good morning, fellow workers. Congratulations and solidarity with Starbucks workers. Yes, really looking forward to seeing their victories there. DL Sendero, peace, comrades, and fellow workers. Jada says, good morning, Tempest Lord Rayhan, solidarity from the Houston IWW. Lots of comments on my echoing, including from the president of the Rocket Scientists Union here. But appreciate all of that feedback. Very important. Unfortunately, the Facebook stream had to be killed, so the folks who normally watch on Facebook, hopefully they have transitioned over to YouTube, but maybe not. If you're hearing me, Joe and Mel, appreciate you tuning in. Folks, we got a good second half of this program. We have a pre-taped interview with Stephen Greenhouse, former New York Times labor reporter, and we have a pre-taped interview with Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr that we were going to play in the first half of the program, but we were not able to get to it. We talked to him about his support for vouchers and loosening child labor regulations. Yeah, there we go. So lots of good stuff coming up here. Let's get to this call first, though. We have a caller from a 334 area code. Caller from a 334 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Hey, can you hear me, caller?
Hello.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me? I guess the caller is not hearing me. I don't know how to fix that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There you go. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you good. My phone was acting a fool.
Okay, good. No worries. Yeah, 334 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I've got something to say about the UAW coming into Hyundai and everything. I said, wait a second. Can you say again one more time?
Yeah, just what's your name? Where are you calling from? What's on your mind?
It's just a delay on it.
Yeah, I guess there is a delay. But yeah, just tell me what your name is and where you're calling from and what you wanted to talk about.
Name's Adam. I'm from Montgomery. I work at one of the Tier 1 suppliers for Hyundai.
Okay,
bring them
great.
in because it's better pay, better benefits for our people. I've seen people get worked to the bone.
So you're supportive of the union campaign down there at Hyundai.
I try to educate all our coworkers we have.
Yeah, so you're talking about trying to get them to support the union campaign down there?
Yeah, there's about a 50-second delay right now.
Oh, man, a 50-second delay. Jeez. That's crazy.
Yes, trying to get support, and they're not giving out any information. I have two coworkers whose relatives work up north in Michigan, And between me and the other two, we have tried to educate, and we've got our entire department and just trying to teach them and make sure everyone's educated.
Well, Adam, really appreciate you calling in and letting us know that, and that is fantastic news about getting folks from your department on board. Really looking forward to seeing more success out of that campaign. And if you have any more details you want to let us know, then call in and leave us a voicemail. Like I said, I'm not sure why there's such a long delay. That is typically not the case when we have callers, so there may be something that I'm doing on my end, again, that's messing something up. So if you have some more details you'd want to let us know, then call in after we get off of the air, and you can leave a voicemail. You can leave a voicemail, and we'll play it on the next on next week's show, because I'm really interested in learning more about what's going on down there, and some of the conditions on the ground. I may even shoot you a text. So, like I said, appreciate you calling in, and leave us a voicemail if there's anything else you wanted to make sure that we knew. All right, folks. So, first up for this half of the program, let's talk about, let's just get right to some of our pre-taped interviews. So like I said, we talked to Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr about his support for vouchers and loosening child labor regulations. It was a respectful conversation, obviously, but you know, what we wanted to do was very limited. We had 15 minutes, and it was a super hard stop. So unfortunately, we weren't able to go too deep into some things that we would have liked to. But you know, feel like it was a good interview, and we got some answers to questions that other folks, you know, I don't think have asked. So here is that clip of our conversation with Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr.
We'll go ahead and get started. I've just started recording, so I appreciate your time. We have with us Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr. He's very busy, and you know, I know that we're in the middle of a session, so only have a limited amount of time, and we wanted to ask you a couple of questions about some of the bills that we, you know, that we disagree with you about. But we don't want you or anybody else to think that, you know, we think that you're like the worst legislator out there, that you've done a lot of things that we really agree with, and that we really appreciate genuinely, like the removing the sales tax of menstrual products and baby products, your opposition to the construction of a quarry in Belmina in Limestone County, and perhaps even surprisingly, your support of a bill that would increase civil and criminal penalties for employers who violate child labor law. So just want to get that out of the way. We've talked about some of those before, and we'll continue to talk about that on our program. But we wanted to spend some of the time trying to get some answers on some of this other stuff. So wanted to start with the CHOOSE Act. That's a type of voucher programs. There have been a lot of states that have implemented something like this. This one would give parents $7,000 to go to a private school, homeschool parents $2,000, up to $4,000 if they have multiple kids, I think. And it phases in, and you're starting with children with special needs and poor children, and then after 2 years, it opens up to everyone. The pot of money starts at $100 million from the fiscal year 23's surplus. So could you tell us what happens after the expansion? After 2 years, once everybody is eligible, is there a cap, or is it just treated like a right?
So it's a little confusing. So couple things on that. The 500 special needs children get first access. I believe there was an amendment in the House that included a priority for children of veterans, active duty military, who live in school districts that are, I forget the terminology, they used to be referred to as failing school districts. I forget the new nomenclature for that, but they would get a priority. Then you start at the lowest income levels and work upward based on income as far as eligibility. Then on the amount,
even though the bill says at least 100 million, we are able to determine that amount in the annual appropriation process and in the budget. So if one year we wanted it to be 60 million, we can do that. It's not a requirement that we have to always do 100 million.
So each year you have to approve a new amount, and
Correct.
the default is zero. What would the default be?
Well,
if no anything is passed on that.
We have to appropriate the amount, and again, in the budget amount, in the budget process, according to the staffers, that is something, the barometer that we can go up or down on. There is a cap. You can't do more than 90%. If 90% of the money from the previous year is not utilized, you can't increase the amount. So that's something that was put on in the House.
Okay, so that's interesting. So this would not be like just a free for all. You have to set an amount, and then you can't, for that year, you can't go over that amount in any given year.
The practical problem would be if you cut it in half, you may have children that have enrolled in this school over there, and then now, based on their income, they're not going to be eligible, and so they would lose that $7,000 savings account for their school that they're going to.
Recently, the state has determined that the revenue has not increased enough in the Education Trust Fund to cut the grocery sales tax by another %. That's also been a phase in. And so why do legislators feel like we have enough money to direct $100 million towards a new school voucher program, but not enough money to further cut taxes on groceries?
Right. With the grocery tax, we put a proviso in that bill last year that said the second penny would fall if there were 3.5% year-over-year growth in the ETF. So the projections are that we won't hit the 3.5% growth year over year, and so that's the reason the second penny didn't drop off. But a 2%, 3%, call it what you will, is still several $100 million of growth that you would see in the budgets if that's the amount.
What's the problem that you feel like you're trying to address with the school voucher program?
Well, again, this was Governor Ivey's bill, and I was asked early in the process. You remember last year, we had a bill called the Price Act that had a sticker price of, my recollection, $500 to $600 million that gave me sincere heartburn, and I amended it heavily in committee and still wasn't comfortable with it. But I was asked last fall to come help Governor Ivey craft the current bill, and worked with her staff. And I will say this: the bill that was introduced was very different from where the bill was when Chairman Garrett and myself entered the room and saw where they were headed. And because of a lot of feedback from both Chairman Garrett and myself, the bill came down substantially, because I couldn't support something that I don't believe that we can afford. And so all that to say, I felt it important to be in the room helping craft something that I knew was coming and make it a manageable amount, as opposed to something that was not manageable and having a lot of disagreement later on down the road.
Okay.
So if I can jump in real quick, would it be fair to say that, some form of school choice legislation was bound to happen, and so you felt it best to kind of be involved as opposed to not being involved?
That's where I felt the wind blowing strongly. And again, there are some good points, some very good points about flexibility and choice, particularly those in marginal school districts, giving parents the ability. But at the same time, it's a balance, because we do not need to erode the credibility of our public schools, in my opinion.
So, like we said at the beginning, we're not the first state to do this, and I'm interested in if you or some of the other legislators have really dug into the results, because some of these programs in other states are actually pretty old now, and there have been some pretty robust academic research done on them, and so I'm wondering if y'all have done any of that and what you found.
I have seen some. I can't recall it at present, but I have seen, positive results, and I think that's a lot of with statistics and data. Sometimes it can be manipulated by either side, who's for it, who's against it. And it depends on whose interpretation of the data you're looking at. But there's conflicting data out there, and I understand that.
Well, yeah,
okay. So guys, I gotta move on. So if y'all got other questions, I'm glad to answer them, but I'm 6 minutes late for my call with the Tennessee attorney to talk about easements.
Well, I wanted to, I guess I wanted to share some of the stuff that we've seen that, the majority of these vouchers have been utilized by people who are already in private school. And one of the issues with their effectiveness is that the private schools that are actually good, they tend not to accept folks who make use of the vouchers. And so there are these schools that pop up that are not very good. And that's the ones that people who actually make use of these vouchers to move from public schools to private schools, that's where they actually end up going. And so because of that, from what we've seen, there's actually been a decrease in academic achievement.
One thing that we added was to require the participating private school to report its ranking, I'll call it, or percentile place for that particular school. They've got to report that to the Department of Revenue, and that will be reported to parents and whomever wants to see it. So if I've got a school that I'm sending my children to, for example, that's got a 10, they're in the bottom 12%, that puts me on notice. Perhaps this private school may look good on the outside, but it's not so good on the inside, and not a good place maybe to send my children.
On the child labor bill, are you aware of any superintendent or school that has restricted a 14 or 15-year-old from being able to get an after-school position that reasonable people would agree that this child can handle an after-school job?
Right. I'm not, but the idea that you've got to go get permission from the government to get an after-school job, I understand why it was maybe put in place years ago, but in today's world, with all the federal labor laws that apply, where you can't work after, I believe it's 8 or 9 o'clock. I think it's 7 o'clock on school nights, and have no more than 3 hours on school days. Cumulatively, no more than, I believe it's 18 hours during the school week or during the school year. A lot of no dangerous jobs. You're talking waitresses, restaurants, retail type establishments. Not like digging ditches for a road crew or laying bricks or whatever on a construction site. So I feel comfortable that it is something that we can do, and just leave it between the parents and the child, or the guardians and the child, as to whether Johnny or Mary can handle it.
Have you accepted the amendment that was proposed in the committee to actually make parents sign a form to say that they agree with that?
We had a conversation in committee, and actually there was a reporting amendment put on the floor, and that was adopted, and then I had an amendment reflecting the parent notification of the child taking a job, so you wouldn't have a child having a job without the parent knowing.
I had one final question. We'll let you go. Appreciate your time. The question about, and this is a question about other workplace safety regulations, and it actually ties really neatly, because you mentioned federal level labor laws like OSHA and things like this. Public sector employees in Alabama are not covered by OSHA, actually. State and municipal employees, they don't get those OSHA protections. 1819 News, actually, funny enough, did a really good piece about a employee of the State Forestry Service who was killed. There wasn't any accountability for his lack of training or anything like this. And then even private sector employees in the state of Alabama who are protected by OSHA, there's no state level equivalent like there are in other states. And so you have 27 federal investigators who are charged with the safety enforcement for 2 million employees in the state. It would take them about 180 years to visit each work site once, is my understanding. So would you support state level OSHA to protect public sector employees in the state of Alabama, state and municipal, and increase and state level enforcement of federal safety laws for private sector workers?
Okay. I don't know if I heard the second part of that question. This is news to me. I was not aware that there were not safety laws that applied to our state employees. That's news to me, and that's concerning. And you mentioned some employee. I was not aware of that either in the forestry, forestry commission that was killed recently.
A guide tower fell on him after he was pretty new, had only been working for a few months, had not been given trainings on decommissioning guide towers. And his family was not given a report or a lessons learned. There was no fine, obviously, because OSHA doesn't have jurisdiction.
Where did the incident occur?
It's been a minute, but I'll send you the article.
Okay. Well, and I know, with ALDOT employees and people like that in very dangerous positions, my thinking was that they were very cognizant of safety and the need to be safe and take those necessary precautions. But it's certainly something I don't mind looking into. And if there is some legislator leading that charge, I'd love to know who it is. I'd like to hook up with them and see where they are on the issue.
All right. Thanks for your time.
All right. Hey, thanks, guys. You guys have a nice weekend, okay?
All right, you too. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll go ahead and get started.
All right, so there you go. I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share with you as I'm listening to that interview again. Going back to the vouchers, his support for vouchers, I thought that it was interesting in his answer to the question that when I asked him what problem is he trying to solve by sponsoring this legislation, he was the one who brought the bill forward in the Senate. He was very clear to make sure that it was known that it was Kay Ivey's bill. It was apparently not his idea. And so when I asked him, what problem are you trying to solve? He didn't give me one. He didn't give me a problem that he was trying to solve. There was no affirmative case that he was making for school choice. And so it's interesting that this is the guy in the state Senate that is sponsoring this, and he is the head of all of the committees, the Education Budget Committee and all this stuff. Very powerful legislator. He's been in there a long time, and so he's sponsoring this legislation. And there wasn't a single problem that he was trying to address. At first it was implicit, and then Adam made it explicit that he felt like vouchers were gonna pass this year. And so he wanted to go in there and try to mitigate damage. I think that's a really fascinating revelation. I think that's really fascinating and genuinely kind of newsworthy that the sponsor of this legislation is not making an affirmative case for vouchers. Not making an affirmative case, not saying that there's some problem that we're solving here, just that there are some other people in his party who were going to do this regardless, and so he wanted to go in there and moderate it some. I think that's interesting. Also, when we asked about results, Alabama's not the first state to conceive of a voucher program. Right. There are other states who've done this. Some of these other voucher programs are actually quite old now. So like I told him, there's been some robust research on it. And I thought it was also telling that, again, this is the guy, right? This is the guy. He can put the onus on Governor Kay Ivey if he wants, but he's the person bringing this. He has attached his name to it. He's the guy in the state Senate. when I asked him about, have you even done any research into like what the academic consensus on vouchers is? Have you even just read one of these studies? He couldn't. There were no numbers that came to his head. Right? He didn't have anything off the top of his head about the results of this huge policy change for education in the state of Alabama. Nothing. He knew nothing. Right? Other than what anybody can say about anything. You have conflicting data, and some people say something and some people say another thing, right? You can say that about literally any issue where there is a dispute about the facts, right? You can, I mean, there's not a single issue that you can't say that about. Oh, well, there's conflicting data. There's conflicting data about literally anything. And so the fact that he doesn't even have in his back pocket the data that supports vouchers as he's pushing this in the legislature, I think that's also revealing, and I think that's also newsworthy. But it is a shame that he doesn't know the data, because the data does seem clear, even though yes, you can manipulate numbers and show that certain things, you can make the numbers say whatever you want, like he said, but clearly on a good faith reading, and you're trying to actually figure out what the results are. The results are not good for school voucher programs. They take money away from public schools because 70 to 90% of the people who use these vouchers were not in public schools before. Right? And so one of the things that pro-voucher people will say is that, oh, look, what we do is we spend in Alabama $10,000 per pupil. I don't know if that's actually the number, but let's just say for the sake of argument. Well, vouchers, we're only given $7,000. So if a person leaves public schools and takes that $7,000 voucher, well, that's actually $3,000 that's unaccounted for, that's not tied to a head that the school system just gets for free. That's one of their arguments, right? And if that were the case, that 100% of the vouchers that were utilized in that way, people leaving public schools, then there would be some truth to that. Now, obviously, even if that's the case, there's complications there, right? Because there's you start losing, you lose enough kids, and then you're going to have to fire teachers, and there's problems there. And then also you have economies of scale, right? If you have a school of 100 people, then yes, it's true that it costs maybe $10,000 per head to teach them. Well, but if you start losing those, losing more of them, then the cost per head is actually going to go up, right? So obviously there's some problems even with that, but that's not the reality that we see with these voucher programs across the country. The thing that we see is actually that 70 to 90% of the people who use these vouchers were in private schools already. They were already outside of the public school system. So all of this money is just being drained from the public school system that was there before, right? So it's obviously a drain. And the results are not good. The results for the people who actually use it in the way that they present it, people who leave public schools and go to a private school, the results are very bad. Learning loss between 0.15 standard deviations and 0.5 standard deviations. And for those of you who've ever taken a statistics course, a standard deviation is actually very big. One standard deviation is huge. And just to put it in perspective, 0.15 standard deviations is approximately the learning loss that children in New Orleans schools faced after Hurricane Katrina and like the total destruction of the public school system in New Orleans. 0.5 standard deviations of learning loss is more than twice the learning loss that students experienced during the pandemic. Okay, so these are huge numbers, really unacceptable numbers, and it doesn't appear that he's aware of them, or he's aware of what a counterargument would be to that. So, revealing and I think newsworthy things there about his support for vouchers. I think that's really kind of fascinating. The other thing I asked about child labor again. Here we have, what problem are you trying to solve, right? What problem are you trying to solve? Are you aware I asked him of a single instance of a student who reasonable people can agree can handle an after-school job. Are you aware of even a single instance of this happening? And he said no. He said no, right? And so there's no problem here. There's no problem with the system. There's not this rash of children, of straight A children who are wanting to work, and the government, right? He used that boogie word instead of the schools. The government is keeping these 14 and 15-year-olds who are academically capable from working. That's just not happening. It's not happening. It's not a real issue. Further, he mentions that, the child labor laws and all of this, and we know that the child labor laws are not enforced very strongly. And also the jobs that you're going to talk about getting for children. Yes, they are not physically dangerous. Typically, they're not physically dangerous. Of course, there are dangers in a restaurant. You're working the grill or the fry basket, something like that. Those are there's danger there, but that's not what people typically think of when they think of a dangerous job. Okay, we can grant that, but also it is the case that the service industry has the highest incidence of sexual harassment. Highest incidence of sexual harassment of basically any industry in the country, right? Service industry, where we send our children, And there's no reporting requirement for people who employ minors to tell the parents if they or the child if one of their future coworkers are have been arrested for sexual assault or sexual harassment. No requirement for that. So there are dangers in these facilities that should be considered when we're thinking about do we just want to really push children into the workforce? I had a job when I was 17, right? But is that something that we want to encourage more people to do? Obviously, I think the answer is no. I think that opportunity should be there for people who are capable, for children who are capable, in the right environment and with the right restrictions on time and intensity and danger of work. But it's not something that we should be pushing. There's not a societal value created by more children working. There's just not. So yeah, there we go. That was my conversation with Alabama State Senator Arthur Orr. We have another pre-taped conversation with former New York Times labor reporter Stephen Greenhouse about a bunch of stuff, and we end on a really funny note. So y'all are going to enjoy this conversation here with Stephen Greenhouse, and I'll be right back to break down some of the stuff at the end. So here you go.
We have with us right now Stephen Greenhouse, former New York Times labor reporter. He is now a Century Foundation Senior Fellow and author of Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. Stephen Greenhouse, thank you for taking the time.
Very nice to be here.
So, being a New York Times labor reporter for as long as you were, we were... Adam and I were on a podcast a while back, maybe in the last week or two, and somebody asked us, what would we say to somebody 25 years ago? If somebody went to sleep 25 years ago, was then cryogenically frozen, and they just woke up and they were a union person, and you had to explain to them, what's happened in the last 25 years and what's the difference between now and 25 years ago. I thought about this afternoon. I know I didn't tell you that we'd be asking you this question, but I figured this is one that you'll be able to riff on pretty easily. I can't think of anybody else better to talk to this person who just woke up from a 25-year coma than Stephen Greenhouse. So what are you saying to this person?
You're very kind. So the union movement in the United States, right now there's been a real resurgence in labor activity with, the strikes and the organizing. 25 years ago, in comparison, things were much more quiet. Unions weren't as active. They weren't going on strike as much. There was much less organizing. There was in the mid 1990s an effort with the AFL-CIO, the nation's main labor federation, to try to increased organizing again. There was a little bit of a stir 25 years ago, but it really didn't amount to much. But that's not to say there wasn't something going on. I went down to New Orleans 25 years ago when there were some early efforts to try to unionize hotel workers. I went down to Birmingham when the Steelworkers Union, this is again 25, 30 years ago, when the Steelworkers Union was still pretty mighty, pretty powerful in Alabama. So I'm not saying that, there's nothing going on with unions, but not like today. So like someone who went to sleep 25 years ago would think, well, the union movement was pretty, I don't want to say moribund, but like relatively inert, not very active. And then say, wake up now and see, well, there's this humongous UAW strike this past summer, and they see workers organizing at Starbucks, not just in New York State and Washington State, but in Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia and Louisiana. And when they see it organizing at Trader Joe's, the Trader Joe's in Louisville just unionized, and there are various efforts to unionize Amazon. So, things are different. Another big difference, I should say, is that many more young people are interested in unions and fighting back and trying to get their fair share. And again, 25 years ago, I think if you ask the average American who's involved in unions, they'd probably say, people who are 55-year-olds. But the people who are pushing at, universities across the country and museums across the country to unionize, a lot of nurses are unionizing, a lot of healthcare workers are unionizing. I mean, we have undergraduate students, undergraduate cafeteria workers, undergraduate researchers at, for various professors, they're unionizing, so, it's the union movement, a lot of the energy right now is with, people under 30, and that's a humongous change from, these are people who are 5 years old who maybe weren't even born 25 years ago, but that's another big difference in the labor movement.
Well, and you mentioned that there were reform efforts, 25, now maybe 30 years ago, back in the 90s. And that's actually something that I thought about too. When they said 25 years ago, I immediately thought of, I think they were called New Voices or in the AFL, and then also Ron Carey and the Teamsters. 25 years ago, this person would have just seen the death, basically, of, they went to sleep in 1999 or 2000. They would have seen basically the death of a nascent reform movement in U.S. labor, and all the activity right now. A lot of it has been generated by a reform movement, and so I'm wondering, what are the differences, if any, that you see between the reform movements in the 90s and the reform movements around today?
That's a great question. Just let's go back even further for a minute. So, very fast history lesson. Before the Great Depression in the 1930s, unions were very weak. During the Great Depression, there were lots of strikes. Under Franklin Roosevelt, a huge law was passed that gave the federal backing to unionization. And unions really got much stronger in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And they were strong in the 60s and 70s. In the 1980s, the United States felt huge amounts of global competition from Japan, from Europe. Volkswagen started sending a lot of cars into the United States, foreign steel. So American industry felt much more competition, and inflation went under control with the Arab oil boycott. So there was a real effort by companies to reduce costs. Then they closed a lot of plants, and that's when things really turned, started to go bad for unions. So in the 1990s, people said the union movement is really taking on the chin. We got to try to reawaken it, reinvigorate it. So there was this New Voices effort. We're tired of seeing unions and workers flat on their backs. We got to try to organize again. And there was someone ran to be the president of the AFL-CIO, the big labor federation, John Sweeney, and his vow was to reawaken, reinvigorate labor again. And he said, we all have to invest, all the 50, 60 unions in the AFL-CIO have to spend at least 20% of their budget on organizing so that labor would grow again. And so, Sweeney really tried. It was a noble effort, but there was just a lot of inertia. And the efforts to organize then were much more top down, not right now they're much more bottom up generally, and that's a big difference. Another big difference is, again, the energy of young Americans is really so important right now to the labor movement. You see at Starbucks, you see at Amazon, you see when 3,000 graduate students organize at MIT, or over 1,000 graduate students at Duke in North Carolina. So there's a lot of youthful energy, and that's making a big difference. And 25 years ago, I don't know if the internet existed. I don't know if TikTok certainly didn't exist. Twitter. So another huge difference is that social media has become a very important tool in organizing, and it's really helped workers in many ways. One of the big unfairnesses in efforts to unionize, and I've written extensively about this, is like if you want to unionize a factory or a call center or often a hospital, the employer will say, will totally prohibit union organizers from setting foot on company property. There's a famous Supreme Court case where some union organizers put leaflets on the windshields of cars in the parking lot, and the company said, you can't do that, you can't do that. And the Supreme Court said, that's right, the company has the absolute right to prohibit union organizers from setting foot on company property, while at the same time, companies can, if I may use the word, propagandize their workers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've been in workplaces where companies show anti-union videos, nonstop in the break room and the lunchroom. I went to the biggest employer in the state of Pennsylvania, a hospital chain. On every worker's computer, there's an anti-union screensaver. So union organizers can't set foot in the parking lot or in the lunchroom, but companies have huge access. So that's why social media has made such a difference, because professional union organizers and rank and file workers, they have really ready access to their fellow workers. And as I said, things are much more bottom up. Like the Starbucks unionization efforts, the unionization efforts at colleges, and there've been so many museums of unionized museum workers in New York, Chicago, Colorado, Boston, maybe not so much in the South, but Philadelphia. I mean, these are really bottom up. It's not like, this union president says, we're going to try to unionize that place or that. It's like workers are saying, we want to unionize. They go to the union and say, please help us. And sometimes they do it without much help from the union.
Right. Yeah, I think that tracks. And we asked similar questions to Barry Eidlin, and he had similar responses, that the big difference between the reform efforts in the 90s and today was top down versus bottom up. Which is, like you said, not to say that in the 90s there weren't people working valiantly and commendably to try to fix the situation we were in, but it's just difficult to kind of make this stuff happen from the top if there's not the energy down there at the bottom.
And I've been remiss, I think, and women are playing much more of a leading role in organizing. Again, 25 years ago, not women were active in the labor movement. There weren't many female leaders in the labor movement, but women were making themselves heard. But now much the women are leading the efforts. They're speaking out. Women head some of the largest labor unions in the country. The three largest labor unions in the country are all headed by women right now. The National Education Association, the Service Employees Union, and the American Federation of Teachers. So women play a much bigger part. And look at the Starbucks campaign. Right. So many of the leaders of that are women, and some of them are just brilliant people. I mean, it's really impressive, and not just brilliant, but very brave as well.
Yes, absolutely. And well, let's talk about the Starbucks campaign. They recently got a huge win. Obviously, we can, reserving our right to amend our opinions as details come out. But it looks like a huge deal. Can you tell us what the details are as you see them right now, and your your interpretation of what this means for workers at Starbucks and also workers, across the country in the same industry and others.
So a little background. So in December 2021, more than 2 years ago, workers at several Starbucks in Buffalo, New York, voted to unionize, and they were the first first company-owned Starbucks in the whole country that unionized. First of more than 9,000 to unionize, and since then, nearly 400 Starbucks have unionized. So that was 27 months ago, and yet not one of the unionized Starbucks stores has a union contract. And the workers say that Starbucks has illegally fired over 100 workers for supporting a union, and it's illegal to fire people in retaliation for supporting a union. And the National Labor Relations Board, the federal agency that enforces worker rights and oversees union elections, it's found that Starbucks has, illegally fired several dozen workers, has illegally closed some recently unionized stores, has illegally cut back hours of workers for unionizing. So, that is and was a very prominent fight, and it's gotten very nasty. And people say that the union busting is the most aggressive and most illegal since the famous J.P. Stevens campaign in the South, a textile company in the South, and the Norma Ray company in the 1960s, 1970s. So this past Tuesday, there was a big announcement where Starbucks and its union, the Starbucks Workers United, announced sort of a peace agreement where Starbucks, after fighting tooth and nail against, really after dragging its feet for 2 years and doing very, very little to move forward to reach a contract, it said, we are ready to negotiate a foundational framework so that we could reach an agreement. And Starbucks was giving all sorts of raises and new benefits to workers at its non-union stores, but not giving them to its unionized stores. And that was really to make things tough for the unionization effort. And Starbucks also said, now we will give those raises and benefits to people at our 390, 400 unionized stores. So that's good. So a lot of people, not me, are jumping up and down saying this is a huge win. The question is Starbucks now committed to really reaching a first contract for these 400 stores within a reasonable period of time, or will this still be dragged out for another year or two? Will it take 4 years instead of 2 years? Indications are good. I, having written a ton about Starbucks, have come to distrust them. They would say, when the first unionization efforts began in Buffalo and elsewhere, and they were firing workers and closing stores, they said, we are not anti-union. Like, you take me for an idiot? You tell me you're not anti-union? And now they say, I'm a journalist. I usually try to treat what people say as like something that's credible. But when Starbucks says, we have not broken the law once in any of our unionization and any of our anti-union efforts, even though the National Labor Relations Board has filed 128 separate complaints against them, alleging more than 1,000 individual illegal violations. And they say we didn't break the law once. It's like, so I'm somewhat distrustful of Starbucks. Having said that, some people in the union say, no, Steve, you're being too pessimistic. You're being too distrustful. Starbucks vows that it's turning a page. It vows that it's going to finally move forward and reach an agreement. So if Starbucks does reach an agreement, and if it stops fighting so hard against the union, if it stops breaking the law, that could be a huge deal, because Starbucks right now has become the most visible unionization fight in the country. And Starbucks has, developed a reputation as the most, the biggest, worst, most egregious union buster in the country. So that if Starbucks has been pressured to make peace and reach a good contract, that will be a huge win. It will encourage many more Starbucks stores to unionize, and might encourage, workers at McDonald's or Chipotle or other Amazons or, to try to unionize as well. So it's potentially a big win. And you know, some people say it's a huge win. I say, I don't often quote Ronald Reagan, but you know, trust but verify, or maybe we should say distrust and verify. So we'll see.
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Some people have compared it to the agreement after the UAW's sit-down strike in Flint. And there was at least one, labor historian on Twitter who kind of balked at that. But I recently just finished reading 2 books on the Flint sit-down strike. And, kind of like you right now, when I read the agreement, in the book and the details of it, I was a little underwhelmed. And and there was some amount of underwhelming among the people in the factory. Now, ultimately, they did get a contract and it was good. But the deal at the end of the sit-down strike was just that GM would not negotiate with anybody else for 6 months for any of their employees at any of their locations, and that they would negotiate with the UAW for the plants that struck. And so, it's like, that seems like we're coming to it actually seems like it's a pretty similar kind of situation here where Starbucks is now saying that, we're going to give back pay actually to all the people that we've been withholding benefits from. I think that was one of the things that's going to be a huge deal that I think will really potentially incentivize people at other Starbucks to unionize. They say, oh, look at this, Joe Blow over here working at Starbucks who unionized, that he just got a $5,000 check, back pay check, right? I mean, that's pretty big. And so it seems kind of similar in that, at the point of the agreement, there's reason to be hopeful, but like you said, you kind of want to verify. I wonder what you think about that comparison.
So in my book, Being Down Worked Up, I have a chapter about the Flint sit-down strike, and I say it was, by far the most important strike in the 20th century. And my sense is, it was, they shut down one of General Motors. General Motors was then the biggest, most powerful company in the country. And they knew that if we could unionize that powerful company, that would be humongously symbolic and get the ball rolling so they closed down one of the key factories for GM that made parts that dozens of other GM factories needed. And it's in the middle of winter for 6 weeks. GM shut down the heat and shut down the heat for a while, and then was worried the pipes are going to freeze and then anyway. So, but GM basically surrendered after 6 weeks because this huge company had been shut down, and General Motors had been trying to undercut the union, the UAW, by having a company union to try to sabotage unionization efforts. So I thought it was a pretty big deal when General Motors said, you'll be the only union we negotiate with for 6 months. It's kind of saying, we're going to stop using this company union to try to slit your throat and undercut you. I thought that was, and pretty quickly they got a so-so contract. It wasn't great, but it was like, it got the ball rolling, that they had a contract. And the reason you knew right away it was a success is that dozens or even hundreds of other factories started having sit-down strikes, right? And the amount of unionization in the next few years after that 1937 strike ended was huge. I mean, that was the biggest surge of unionization, I think, in the United States history in those 2 or 3 years right after. So, if the Starbucks workers at 2 months or 3 months got a great contract, that's going to make a huge difference too. I mean, it won't be as huge as the Flint sit-down strike, which was that was the day after the strike began. It was the lead story in newspapers across the country. That was a big deal. It really riveted the nation's attention. I mean, the Starbucks efforts are also a big deal, but it's not as if the nation's attention is focused on it as much.
Right. Yeah. It's not a whole economy kind of crushing or invigorating industry, certainly.
If I may just add very quickly. So Starbucks, I think, is justly called, the most aggressive union buster in the country right now, and the most aggressive one in decades. And, for the union to get this agreement where Starbucks might have really turned the page, turned the corner, and say, we're ready to deal with you and negotiate with you and reach a contract. That's very important. It shows that the union has been very successful at hurting, pummeling Starbucks' image. You know, Starbucks stock price lost $12 billion between November and December after a series of strikes, after a series of public relations hits. You know, people told me that there was a lot of pressure on Biden to speak out against, you know, Biden's having problems winning young workers, partly because of Gaza, partly because the Supreme Court overturned his student debt plan. That's not his fault. And that people are saying we're pressuring Biden to try to step up against Starbucks. And I think Starbucks might have been scared of that. And, you know, so there are many, Starbucks is really starting to feeling the heat. Last week, students at 25 universities called for a boycott of Starbucks. So the pressure is really on.
We mentioned the Flint sit-down strike, and obviously, I think the biggest continual labor story right now, much like Flint, is the UAW. The UAW has not been out of the headlines for more than a few weeks. It seems like since August of 2023. They're embarking on probably the most ambitious organizing campaign since, you know, the time of Flint, the biggest push to organize the South since the CIO's Operation Dixie. They just hit 50% at the second Southern non-union automotive manufacturing plant right here in Alabama at Mercedes. And Mercedes is so scared that they brought Nick Saban yesterday to try to talk to the workers. Fortunately for us Alabama fans, he did not bash the union he didn't say anything positive about the union, but he also didn't say anything negative about the union. And so sometimes, you know, neutrality is the best you can hope for, but, you know, it's better than opposition. So, you know, what are some of the things that you've been seeing and you've been tracking and you're wanting to see from the UAW campaign?
So I think many so this, union membership has declined from like 35% of the American workforce in the 1950s to around 20% in the 1980s to just 10% today. And many people are saying, unions just aren't doing enough to try to organize additional people. And union leaders can, say with some justice, it's really hard because, companies like Mercedes-Benz, Starbucks fight back so hard. And another big problem is that many companies break the law when they try to keep out the union. Many companies fire the 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 workers who are leading the unionization drive. And the National Labor Relations Board will often say, you've broken the law by firing these 7 Starbucks workers in Memphis. And they fired the 7 leaders at a store in Memphis. But under federal law, unfortunately, the federal government, the National Labor Relations Board, can't fire companies that act illegally. They can't fire them. They can't fine them even 1 penny, not $1. So companies feel they have a green light to break the law. So it's really great that the UAW is launching this very ambitious unionization drive of like 13 non-union companies in the South. Tesla, Toyota, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Nissan. So, and the first, and at Volkswagen in Chattanooga and at Mercedes-Benz in Vance, Alabama, more than half 50% of the workers have signed cards saying we want a union, and that's very promising. And I think, it's extremely important that, greatly helping the campaign is the UAW won huge gains in its strike last summer. It, won raises of 25%. It won better pensions. It won the restoration of cost of living adjustments, which is extremely important when you have 10% inflation. That was a major, the UAW for decades had cost of living adjustments, and that was taken away about 15 years ago. So getting that back. So now when the UAW is knocking on doors and telling workers in Chattanooga or Tuscaloosa or Vance, join the UAW. 10 years ago, the workers might have said, oh, what has the UAW done lately? Well, it's done is grant concessions. But now the UAW said, we've done a great job. We've won 25% raises for young workers, even, new workers, even 50% raises. And I think a lot of workers are more interest in joining the UAW with this new, more aggressive leadership that really has a huge winning record under its belt. But as we're seeing in Alabama, the governor and the whole state government is doing everything it can to fight the union. And I think many Republicans don't like unions because their business donors, their billionaire donors say, they're libertarians. They want business to have free reign to do whatever it wants. And I think that's one of the big reasons that governors in Tennessee, governors in Alabama and Mississippi have really actively campaigned against the union. And, I think these governors forget that, unions might discourage businesses from coming, but unions really help create a fairer economy. They help the little guy. They help Joe and Jill six-pack. And, unions can really help lift people at the bottom, help create a fair economy, help create a fair democracy. So I think the big question is whether the UAW can rack up some wins in the South. That would, again, be extremely important. 10 years ago, the UAW tried to unionize VW in Chattanooga, and that would have been a landmark win because UAW really has very few wins at car factories in the South. So if it had won Volkswagen 10 years ago, maybe a lot of the other auto plants in the South would already be organized. So, what's happening now with this effort to unionize the 13 companies, it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. You had a piece recently just published yesterday in The Guardian. We must start preparing the U.S. workforce for the effects of AI now. I'll leave it to people to read that, obviously, since it's from, since it's from you, it is good. But I wanted to I wanted to end with something that I saw on Twitter the other day that I thought that you might be interested in just responding to. And that was the editor of Newsweek saying that Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat. And that's why the left hates him. That's why the left has to destroy him, is because he's a New Deal Democrat. And so he's the ghost of pro-labor Democrats coming back to bite the left. So we'll let you end on your thoughts on that. You're being you've got a great poker face, so interested in your thoughts here.
I don't know who heads Newsweek nowadays, but if anyone says that Trump is a New Deal Democrat, that's an absurd statement. The New Deal was about empowering the little guy, creating a fairer economy, increasing wages for workers, and helping unions. But if you look at Donald Trump's, I'm from New York. I have followed Donald Trump for 40 years. Even when he was a Democrat, even when he supported abortion, even when he was giving money to Bill and Hillary Clinton, I remembered him back then. I thought he was a fraud back then, way before he became a Republican. He would cheat, and I wrote about labor, and he would be forever cheating construction contractors and regular workers, not paying them. And it was all about him trying. It was all there are two things about Trump: trying to show how rich he is and trying to show how many women he can get into bed with him. Those are the two things that motivated Donald Trump. And to say he was a New Deal Democrat, it's like saying a tiger in Africa is a New Deal. It doesn't make any sense. The main thing Trump did as president, his biggest accomplishment, was pass this huge tax break for the very rich and for corporations, and the average American just got peanuts. So it's just beyond absurd to say he's a New Deal Democrat like Franklin Roosevelt, who wanted to create a fairer economy for Americans. And as president, he rolled back all these things that President Obama did to increase safety for workers, to make millions more workers available for overtime. So to say Trump is a friend of workers, Trump went to Ohio and said to workers at a GM plant that was about to close, but before it closed, don't worry, this plant's not going to close. Don't move away, stay here. And the plant closed, and thousands of workers lost their jobs. And like Donald Trump kind of tricks people into thinking, I'm going to save you, I'm going to help you. And then he didn't, the one, anyway, yeah. I mean, so the main thing he does to help workers is to bash immigrants. And again, economic studies show that immigrants help build the American economy. Immigrants pick the strawberries and lettuce we eat, and they help hold down prices for everybody. And a lot of blue collar workers would be paying more for their food if it weren't for immigrants. A lot of workers need people to care for their 89-year-old grandmothers, and those are often immigrants. And having a healthy amount of immigrants is important for our economy. And yes, things are a little crazy at the border right now, but it's Trump just is like so anti-immigrant. It's in a way that is hurting the economy and hurting many Americans. We are a nation of immigrants, and immigrants have done amazing things to build our nation.
Right. She's the opinion editor at Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon. I don't know if you've heard of her, and she was in a thread with Ben Shapiro, and he said this is completely accurate in a reply to her saying Trump is a New Deal Democrat. So pretty perplexing. We retweeted her and said, you're welcome to come on the show and defend this. And so to her credit, she said, let's schedule something. So we're going to be talking to her next week. If she continues to be willing to do this. And my first question is going to be, what do you think the New Deal is? What does that mean to you?
I'm trying to think, in what way could one construe Trump as being yes. Roosevelt had this wonderful works progress program to build bridges and tunnels and roads to put people back to work. Again, Trump talked about, I remember Hillary said, I'm going to have a $500 billion infrastructure program. And the next day, Trump said, I'm going to have $1 trillion infrastructure program. Like Trump showing, I'm going to do better than you, third base. And he never enacted it. He never got the first base on it. It was all BS.
The only thing that I think you could say is that he some of the things that he says sound nice, and he scratches the id of some part of the American working class, and I think that there's truth to that, but I think to then go on to say that he's a New Deal Democrat, I think is actually kind of insulting to American working people that rhetoric is a substitute for actual material change and benefits to us. So.
It's very hard to, I've written a lot about this, and I have a really hard time coming up with, really, I'm not BSing. Anyone, we could say Trump helped blue collar or low wage or workers on the bottom. He did nothing to raise the minimum wage. He rolled back overtime protections. He rolled back safety protections. Yes, he barked a lot against China, but the measures he took against China were really ineffective and ended up causing us to lose factory jobs. So he talks a good ball, again, I'm a New Yorker. I followed Trump for 40 years. He's a great carnival barker. And it disappoints me that all these Americans, swallow what he says. What I remember when when The Apprentice didn't win an Emmy, he said, they cheated us. We're cheated. We're cheated. This is dishonest. When he lost in 2016, when he lost the Iowa caucus to Ted Cruz, he said, "It cheated." This guy is such a BS. Whenever he loses, he says it's cheating. But he's tricked so many Americans to believe that he was cheated in the 2020. I mean, people should see through this guy. He's a extremely dishonest human being, and he's been dishonest from the time he was a Democrat and supported abortion and supported Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Leopard doesn't change its spots. So.
Right. Well, Stephen Greenhouse, appreciate your time. I know that we're a bit over when we wanted to wrap it up. So appreciate you hanging out, and sorry that I got you spun up on such a topic as we were trying to get you out of here. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
Oh, geez. How long have I been muted? Muted. Rip. Sorry, guys. Went silent, can't hear you. Wondering why I can't hear anything. They got the sound. Yeah, they'll catch on in a minute. Muted, no audio, still no audio. Yeah, I think we got it fixed now. Let me know when you are hearing me again. Still no audio. 2 minutes, no audio. There it is. Okay, Leanne Braun, thank you. All right, so, yeah, so I that was a hilarious. That was thank you. We love you anyway. Appreciate it. Yeah. So that was obviously a hilarious face that Stephen Greenhouse made, and you know it is an appropriate face because it's just such a silly thing to say that Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat. So not that Stephen Greenhouse needs any help making the case, but I did want to go over some of the tweets, and I had a couple other points myself that I wanted to make. So. Going back to this tweet here that I have pulled up, Batya, the opinions editor at Newsweek, is replying to Ben Shapiro saying, everyone is ignoring this basic truth about 2024. Donald Trump occupies the moderate middle on many more issues than Biden. That's true on abortion, the border, Ukraine, Israel, China, trans, and equity. Obviously, a silly thing to say, right? That's not true. But Batya said, you want to say a silly thing? Bet. I'll give you one better. Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat, which is why the left has to destroy him. He's the ghost of pro-labor Democrats past, come back to haunt them. And then Ben Shapiro here says, this is totally accurate. The irony is that Biden thinks he's FBR, but he's actually John Kerry. Very, very silly things to say. Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat. And so, you know, Stephen made some of these points earlier about how Donald Trump has always been a scam artist. He's always been somebody to not pay his employees. He's always been, you know, in it for himself. He's never, you know, been a New Dealer. But additionally, you know, during this last year where we were having the UAW situation popping off, you know, Trump was trying to make a play for the UAW's endorsement and trying to convince the UAW that, no, I'm more pro-auto worker than Biden. And he did that by going to a non-union automotive manufacturing plant at the behest of the boss, at the boss's invitation, to give a speech to a non-union crowd, right? Okay, that is not... You know, that's not pro-labor. That's not a pro-labor thing to do while you're ostensibly supporting UAW workers on strike. That's not pro-labor. Additionally, Donald Trump was president during the last UAW strike. In 2019, UAW workers struck at GM, 40,000 of them across the country. And Donald Trump did not support, he didn't say a mumbling word about the UAW strike in 2019. Additionally, in 2021, UMWA coal miners in Alabama were on strike. Now, Donald Trump was not president at that point, but he was still very much in the political conversation, and he obviously could have supported Alabama's coal miners. He left them on the vine. With the NLRB, Donald Trump's NLRB picks rolled back protections for organizing that workers had, rolled back some pro-union decisions at the NLRB. At the Mine Safety and Health Administration, Donald Trump's appointee rolled back a silica ruling that was going to be coming down from Obama's Mine Safety and Health Administration. And we've talked about the issue with silica here on the program several times, and how there is a new rash of black lung among coal miners today because of silica dust. And there's multiple reasons why, you know, black lung is on the rise, but silica dust is a primary factor. And there was a ruling before Trump came in. At MSHA, there was a proposed rule to limit silica exposure and increase mine operators' responsibilities for clearing this dust inside of the mines. And so Donald Trump appointed a coal mine executive to the Mine Safety and Health Administration. And this coal miner executive did exactly what you would think a coal miner boss would do, which is to not institute this proposed rule. And so undoubtedly you can connect Donald Trump's Mine Safety and Health Administration to the deaths of, at minimum, dozens of miners. At minimum, dozens, probably hundreds of miners. You can connect Donald Trump's administration directly to their deaths, right? And so, when you're thinking about that, in comparison to the New Deal, which was a genuinely transformational package of legislation and reordering of the economic system in American society, it's just totally, not only is it's not, even moving in that direction, it's actually exactly the opposite of what the New Deal was. And not to overstate the New Deal, obviously, the New Deal did not usher in a socialist paradise or anything like that. But the New Deal was very transformational, and it made hundreds of thousands, it made millions of workers' lives materially better, shifted the balance of power in their direction. For the first time in American history, the government shifting the balance of power in the direction of the workers. And you had the exact opposite happen under Donald Trump. So it's just a very silly argument. And we told Batya that she is welcome to make that case on our program if she would like. We were going to have her on the program today. And in fact, I'm glad that it didn't work out today, because that would be even more embarrassing to do that with somebody, to have all the technical issues with somebody that you are not friendly with. That would be incredibly embarrassing. So it didn't work out. She's Jewish, so she doesn't do anything on the Sabbath. But we're going to try to schedule a pre-taped conversation with her at some point. So maybe we'll be able to bring that to you. Her making the case that Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat. So there's if you want to support us having that conversation, then, you can give us money for our pain, because I think that will be a very entertaining conversation, but obviously going to say some very, very silly things. Bernardo Proletariat says, that's not how shifting of power works. The government didn't do anything for the labor movement. It's the workers who did for ourselves. And, look, there's absolutely, the labor movement was the catalyst for that. The federal government would not have moved in the directions that it did, but for the labor movement, right? But it is also, it's worth recognizing that the government was not an obstacle, and the government was a catalyst for a lot of this stuff. And we can take a look actually at the Flint sit-down strike. For that, you had a friendly governor, and you had a friendly president, and because of that, in the Flint sit-down strike, unlike in other sit-down strikes or in other just regular strikes, the National Guard was not allowed to be called in to rout the strikers. The National Guard was actually called out to protect the strikers from the local police, right? So, and again, that was because of pressure from organized labor, but it wasn't as if organized labor had such power in society that that labor could unilaterally protect this labor-friendly governor in Michigan, because, in fact, in the election after the Flint sit-down strike, where Michigan Governor Frank Murphy was very supportive of the UAW workers and the strike there, he lost his election, right? So obviously, workers were the catalyst, but it is worth recognizing that who's in government matters. And the fact that Frank Murphy, Michigan governor of the time, actually sent the National Guard to bar the local cops from going in and murdering the auto workers is a huge deal. And he had the support of the president in that, and that was a huge deal, right? So there was a big shift from the presidency. Bernardo Proletariat said, because the governor and FDR knew what was good for them. There was a credible threat of revolution on the table, and they knew better than to kick over a hornet's nest. Yeah, there's definitely something to that. And like I said, the catalyst was for sure the workers. But you could imagine a situation where something different happened, right? I mean, it's not the Flint sit-down strike and the strikes around that area were not the first time that American workers staged large-scale strikes with revolutionary potential, and most of the others were brutally suppressed with, dozens of people being murdered by the state. So that's going to wrap it up for us today, folks. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you would like to leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. Thank you so much for your patience today. Lots of technical issues, again, with Adam being down in Montgomery giving a speech, and Ben having troubles with his back and not being able to come down and help me work out the tech issues. Having to run the thing solo, it was very nerve-wracking, and because I'm not very technically inclined. So appreciate everybody's patience, listening, and obviously appreciate Mark Dimondstein's patience. He was very generous and very patient. So, TVLR.fm is the website. Subscribe to our newsletter we send out Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch. We weren't able to get to Boss Watch today, but that newsletter is still going to go out. So if you want those in your inbox, TVLR.fm, and you can subscribe to our newsletters there. We think that there's some really good information there, and it's a really good, obviously not a comprehensive roundup of labor in the South, because such a thing would not be really possible. But, certainly the most comprehensive weekly newsletter on Southern labor around. Okay, I think I feel confident. I feel confident about that, about taking that title. Last Week in Southern Labor, I think there's something of value there in what we do. And then Boss Watch, a similar thing, but on the opposite end. What are bosses doing? And so to do that, we take a look at the Department of Labor, OSHA, MSHA, stuff like that, to see some of the fines and recent cases that are coming up. So I think those are valuable things and good newsletters to have in your inbox, tvlr.fm. You can donate to the program, tvlr.fm/donate. We could not do this without our donors. We pay to be on a couple of the stations that we're on. Two of the stations that we are on are nonprofit stations, so we are there for free, but we don't get to run ads. And then two of the stations are commercial, and that's where we run our ads. So we have to pay for that. We also pay everybody except myself and Adam. We pay for their time. And we recently, in December, we all voted to raise the wage for everybody to $21 an hour. So obviously we don't have enough work or enough money to give folks full-time work or full-time for them to make their living solely on this. But $21 an hour for a part-time kind of labor of love gig is not too bad, and I feel pretty good about that. And I feel especially good about the fact that we operate as a cooperative. Where everybody has the same voting rights. The people that you don't see on the screen every week have exactly the same voting rights as I do on our board. So and so they have as much say over anything. So we don't have any bosses. So I'm really proud of that, and proud of what we've been able to do here. So that's going to be it, folks. And with that, we'll see you next week. We've got some good folks lined up for next week, so definitely want to stay tuned. Appreciate your patience. And all power to the workers.